So in this video I'm going to just explain a little bit about some of my methods and techniques for doing a front entry, tear out and refit. So we've got some double doors here. Obviously got to just take them out first. Doors out the way. So what I'm doing there is I'm just knifing. I've got my knife and I'm just running it down the edge of where the trim is on the existing frame, because it's really important to get it out cleanly. You save yourself so much time just by taking the time to cut around the architraves and the trim, because it's like glued on there with like caulking and, you know, bits of render and stuff. You don't want to chip that off. It's just, it makes a mess. It looks ugly. Customer doesn't like it if you don't take enough care. And yeah, like I say, it'll take it won't take you that long to do, just to spend that little bit extra at the start, and it will save you a lot of time at the end. You don't want to be mucking around trying to patch up little cracks and chunks that have fallen out of the wall just because you couldn't be bothered giving it a knife with the Stanley knife. So that's important. So what I'm doing there is I'm actually just, you can't see, but I'm shoving some packers in behind the jamb. I'm forcing it out from the brickwork, so that when I stick my saw into it, I do not cut into the render, I do not cut the bricks or anything that's going to be exposed. I set the depth of the saw blade. It's just another way of just taking care that you don't damage anything that's going to be seen after the job's done. It's also a really good idea to set the depth of your saw blade to the thickness of the timber on the top if you're cutting through the top. Sometimes it's not always possible to cut the sides like this one is, because it's double doors. Sometimes there's glass panels on the sides, so you need to cut through the top. And it's really important to set the depth of the blade to that, because quite often there is electrical leads running across the top of the frame, and if you go in too deep, then you're going to cut through some wires, and then you've got to call out an electrician. So many problems. Here I am just cutting the threshold there. Measuring the height, making sure that I can fit the full height of a full height jamb in there that would accommodate a full height door. In this case, I'm going to be doing a sidelight and door. So, and it just so happens there's enough room, I can go the full height of the sidelight. I'll add an extra millimetre just so that I don't have to cut the height of the sidelight. It can just slide straight in. So I'm just measuring the lengths and marking the ends of the jambs there. 8 degrees for the beveled sill there. And also I mark in square off the inside edge 5mm, because there is actually a ridge on the back edge of the sill, and so that it meets flush on the back edge, I come in 5mm, then cut my angle back from there. It just means there's not like a little bird's mouth on the inside. It just it sits tight. So if you notice there, I actually cut that last bit of timber twice. That's because if you cut a long piece off like that, too close to the mark, you can actually rip a chunk out of the face. So I preemptively cut off a big chunk and then go close to the line to finish it off. So I'm just using the multi-tool there just to notch in where the jamb's going to be sitting on the threshold. It's a variable speed multi-tool, so I can just adjust it to a speed that's appropriate. And just chiseling it out there. I'm just sharpening my chisel there. Always good to have a sharp chisel. Makes it a lot easier to do a clean job quicker. So I'm also just marking out with a piece of the jam where the jam's going to sit, so that I can get it on there nice and square when I'm screwing it all together on the floor. Marking now the header piece, and then once I've marked all of those spots where the jams are going to be going in, I'm going to take it to the drop saw, which is on the floor to the right hand side of the screen. You won't see me cut it, but that's what I'm doing. And I'll just cut in the depth of the mullion on those double rebate. So I just very carefully, because it's a cross-cut saw, not a drop saw, I'm able to just slide it slowly across and just watch to see where it's breaking out. Make sure I don't cut in too deep, so it's nice and neat. So when the jam comes in to meet it, there won't be any overcutting that's visible. So yeah, I'm just going to chisel out those bits of the mullion now that I've just cut with the drop saw, with the cross-cut saw, I should say. I'm marking out the hinges here on the hinge jam, so make sure I do all that first. So I just clamp one end on to the bench. I've got my little jig. If you don't have a jig for your hinges, definitely make one. Mine's adjustable. I have little mini rulers, like about 6 of them, that are all bolted together on the back, which you can flip on or off just to adjust the depth by a millimetre at a time, because they're about a millimetre thick. So I put 5 hinges on because this is a 1200 wide door. It's nice and strong. They give me 6. I think that's too much. 5 is almost too much, but I hate to waste the hardware, so at least use 5 anyway. I cut out all the hinge pockets there with that jig and the router. That hinge jig I also use on the edge of the door too, so it's a dual purpose jig. And because you can change the depth of it with those rulers I was talking about, I simply have 2 of the rulers on, just to give a little bit of clearance for the back of the barrel of the hinge, so it's not too tight against the jams. And then I put the rest of the flick the rest of the rulers across. It adds another 4mm, so they get the correct depth for the door, so that when it goes on, it swings in tight to the jam. There's not a huge gap between the jam and the door. You want to get it as tight as you can, but also room to move. So I usually put I put 3 screws through the header and through the threshold into the jams. I sort of I like to nail them first, just to sort of initially get him into the right position, but then I screw them off. Just makes it really strong then. All right, time to pop it in. All right, so I've just discovered I need to pack out one side. The stud sort of sits back from the brickwork by about 20 mils. So I'm just adding a packer there. I'm going to screw it off as well because that's a fair distance, and you want to make sure that especially the hinge side is anchored in well to the wall through the frame. Put that packer in there, anchored it off so that it's going to be strong. I felt a rocking. It wasn't sitting evenly, so I'm just getting some spray foam, just putting a very thin line of foam underneath so that when I pop the frame on there, it's going to be well supported. You're not going to have any flexing up and down in the frame when people stand on it. It helps fill up any deviation and gaps and stuff. So I'm just sticking some little packers on top of the frame there, just wedging those in. It helps force the frame hard down against the ground, against the foundation, and also allows me to have a bit of control. Keeps everything still, stops it from moving around, and then I'm just able to easily adjust it, get it square, get it plumb, before I start, sticking packers down the side and screwing it off. I'm just checking the diagonals there, making sure that the frame is dead square so that I won't have to dry fit the door. I'll be able to just measure it. So I'm just checking for straightness. That's me getting up and down, looking up and down the jamb, making sure it's straight, shoving packers in there. I just use the edges of doors that I've cut and trimmed for my packers. I just collect them, and it saves money. I always want to save money, so speed things up a little bit. I'm just sticking those packers in and screwing off through the hinge pockets so that they're not seen. Once the hinges go on, there'll be no sign. So there you go. See, there's the hinge pockets. I've got a screw in every single one of those hinge pockets. It also ties the strength of the door fitting itself. Okay, so I'm just pointing out that side there has no screws in it, and you'll want to leave it that way until you've got the door in. And you'll see in a little while why that's an important part of the important step in the process, I should say. So I'm just checking that door there just to see which way it's bowing. Because one thing you want to try and aim for is to have a door that shuts really evenly against the jamb. So if there's a slight bow in the door, you want to make it so that the top and the bottom hit the frame first, so that when the latch goes in, it pulls it in tight, so that there's no rattling around, there's no gap at the top and the bottom while it's tight in the middle. You want it hitting at the top and the bottom first, if anything. It's great if it hits all at the same time, of course, if it's dead straight. So yeah, just trimming the door. As I've just gone 6 mil less than the overall height of the frame. Just a couple of mil at the top, 3 mil or 4 mil at the bottom. I usually aim for 3 mil at the bottom. So I'm just marking the mortise lock in the edge of the door. I like to do everything while it's sitting in the door jaws. Some carpenters like to do their locks once the door's hanging. I prefer to do it in the door jaws. So I'm just marking it there with the mortise gauge there. I use a 19mm auger bit for drilling the main mortise. So I'll just drill a bunch of those holes, and then I'll just get my nice wide chisel and just clean out the edges and dig it out with my skinny chisel. And blow it out with my little blower there. Then I like to use a 25mm Forstner bit to do the holes in the face of the door for the lock to come through, and I've just stuck from the other side a little piece of ply in the mortise so that when I don't blast through to the other side. So I'll go from both sides to cut that out, but because there's a cavity in the middle, we'll sometimes jump through and try and blast out the other side. And so I just stick a piece of ply inside the cavity that I've just drilled. And again, using a jig that I've made to do the faceplate for the mortise. Definite must have. Just cleaning out the corners there. One last little clean. Drop the mortise lock in and it goes. And then just put the lock in, and then fit all the hardware for the inside and the outside of the door. I won't bother putting the pull handle on. That's the one part that I won't do till it's all standing up. It's just easier. Now, one thing is you want to lift the door up like that. Save your back. It's just easier working with these wide doors. Lift up one corner at a time when you're lifting it up out of the door jaws onto the stool, and then you've got a little bit more height. Don't have to bend down quite so far to get it up. Just save your back. Marking out the hinges. So I got mine set at 150, 550, 950, 1350, 1750 from the top. So that's that same hinge jig that I used on the door jambs. Now I'm using it on the side, and I've just flipped the rest of those little rulers across to put 4mm extra back onto the back set. And that just means that it's going to match what's on the jamb. The jambs are like 45mm deep. These doors are 40. You want a 1mm gap between the door and the mullion. So now I'm just screwing those on. So now time to hang it. And it goes. I just chuck a couple of packers on the ground at the correct heights. Makes it a lot easier to line it up, to have it lined up with the hinge pockets. So I'm just pre-drilling all of my holes there, just with I think it was 2.5 or 3mm bit, and that just means that you're not going to snap any of the heads of the screws off, and it just looks better using those screws rather than gyprock screws or whatever. They're stronger, but they just don't look very nice. So what I'm doing there, I'm taking off the top hinge because it's coming across a little bit too tight against the jamb, and seems to be a touch low underneath. So I'm just pulling out one of the packs I had in there before, and then just tightening the screw up against the jamb, and that will pull the top across a bit, and also the leading edge bottom will come up just slightly as well. That'll help it to sit in the frame a little bit more neatly. I'm just checking it again. Yeah, and what I've noticed, I also need to do that in the second hinge down as well, just to help really tie it back to the hinge jamb, nice and tight. So that should be good now. One thing I want to check is the other side's not screwed off yet. So this is where you'll see as I close it, there's a gap at the bottom. So it'll be nice and tight there at the top. There's a gap at the bottom, probably about 10 mil or something. And so that's why I haven't screwed off the other side. So now I can hit this side across. So I'm going to bash that over. And once I'm happy with that, you can see now it's a nice tight fit top to bottom, no rattle. So now I'm just going to shove packers in that side and screw it in at the top, screw it in the bottom. So you can see I'm actually screwing into the spot on the rebate where it's going to be hidden. So once the side light goes in, you're not even going to see that fixing. It's not something that's going to need to be puttied or anything. It's just not going to be visible. So that's what you want. As many fixings as you can get invisible, the better. So the next thing you want to do is measure the side light. I've already made the height of the frame so that I don't have to cut the height, but the width is just a little bit. It's just a little bit too tight, so I'm just going to trim just the smallest sliver off the edge of the side light. Also, something else that you should know is that I put a slight bevel on the saw, so there's about a millimetre less on the opposite side. Just makes it getting things in easier and gets it nice and tight too. So I'm just whacking a packer in on the side there until it's getting the jam nice and tight to the side light, and then I'm going to pop that side light back out again, and then I will fix off the middle. But that's how you know it's right. I'm also checking to make sure that it's not pushing the jam across too far and jamming up the door. The last thing you want is to fix it in place and then you can't close the door. So yeah, nailing off the packers, screwing off the middle, it's in place. Now I can just trim those off. The multi-tool. And you want to put silicone all the way around on the mullion in the rebate. The nails by themselves just isn't strong enough. If it's got a nice bit of silicone there to spread the load across the whole length of the door, of the side light, that will increase its strength quite a lot. So now I'm just nailing that off. And because of using I'm going to be using a double jam in the middle. I've got a double jam, I should say. It's going to be covered in the centre with a cover strip once I do the trimming out. So what I've actually done is, aside from those fixings, one at the top, one in the middle, and one at the bottom, on the outside edge there, in the centre, I've actually nailed it by skewing from the centre of the double jams into the side light, so that they'll get covered up by the cover strip, which will have nails in it anyway. I still have to be puttied, but there you go. So that's it's finished. Obviously, you'll know how to do the trimming out, architraves and everything else, but hopefully there's some tips there that can be helpful.